The Steam Deck is actually not that old, less than half the lifespan of a typical console, but nevertheless, its impact on the gaming industry has been incredibly huge, essentially dividing the world into before and after. Yeah, it's not like there weren't handheld PCs before the Steam Deck, but Valve didn't just release another handheld PC, they changed the whole attitude, or the perception of how everyone used to view portable gaming, because before, portable games were mainly associated with special ports or completely separate games, but with the Deck's release, it's almost any game from your Steam library today. I'm going to tell you how Steam Deck managed to do this, where it all started, what it changed, and why its influence goes way deeper than just another console. So this video promises to be interesting, so don't skip anything and enjoy. Actually, the pioneer in popularizing AAA gaming on the go was, surprisingly enough, the PSP way back in 2004, way too groundbreaking for its time. Back then, when other handhelds like the Nintendo DS offered mostly arcade titles, the PSP gave you the feeling of full console games in your pocket. Not without its issues, which I'll talk about in my PlayStation Portable retrospective that I'm already working on, so subscribe so you don't miss anything. But the first brick in the foundation of real, hardcore portable gaming can be credited to the PSP in this foundation of the portable gaming world. Then Sony obviously tried to repeat the success with the PS Vita, more modern, with a better screen, finally 2 sticks, and many other cool features, including full, again, AAA games like Uncharted Golden Abyss. But it failed. We won't debate the reasons now, and it doesn't really matter. The main thing is that the whole full AAA on the go theme started to disappear, and for years nobody even remembered it. Until Nintendo came back with their Switch, the hype around which proved that people still wanted to play on the go, there just wasn't a company that could satisfy their desire, and the Switch became just a small spark in this huge flame. Because despite having no competitors, it had fundamental issues, like weak hardware, which meant they could only port games from previous console generations, and the closed system itself, where games needed to be separately ported, didn't let you play everything you wanted, and yet people still bought the console. So in parallel, handheld PCs from various companies started slowly developing without console restrictions, mainly from China. The first one, if I'm not mistaken, was the Alienware Concept UFO. It was first shown at CES 2020, that's 6 years ago, and it looked like what we, as people from the future, consider a typical handheld PC, a screen with gamepad controls on the sides and full PC hardware inside, mobile hardware actually, but with full Windows back then, nobody had seen anything like it. Though the concept remained just a concept, Alienware themselves still haven't released anything similar, but other Chinese companies got interested, companies like GPD and Ioneo. I was actually considering getting one for my birthday until I watched an unboxing by The Relaxing End. If I find that video somewhere, I'll insert it, but the point is, the device worked unreally badly right out of the box. Games crashed, and the ones that launched ran at simply unplayable frame rates. This was shown, I think, with the then new Resident Evil 2 remake, which launched on the handheld, which was already impressive, but actually playing it was still impossible. Most likely this was fixed with patches and new drivers. But seeing that kind of picture in a device costing more than $1,000, yeah, definitely didn't want that. And yeah, the key problems of early handheld gaming PCs were the high price. Since they were basically produced, almost piece by piece, the production runs were really small, and often they even crowdfunded the first batch on Kickstarter, and secondly, they worked terribly. Because regular Windows wasn't really optimized for such small screens even now, let alone stick controls and vertical screens. So it was an expensive toy and for a very limited circle of people ready to tinker with its settings. But the important thing, there were buyers. And that's when Valve enters the scene saying, what if we combine the comfort of regular consoles and the ability of PCs to run any games from your Steam library? Though even the Steam Deck launch can't be called perfect, it definitely generated interest, but society still remembered Valve's previous device, the Steam Machine, which failed pretty loudly. And by the way, the concerns weren't groundless. Steam Deck was decided to be built on the Steam OS operating system, which the failed Steam Machine ran on Valve already tried back then to create their console alternative. Just not portable but stationary, competing with PlayStation and Xbox, just with a bigger game library, constant Steam sales, and free online. Sounded cool, of course, but in practice, everything immediately went wrong. The problem was that many games are made only for Windows and don't natively work on Linux. At launch, only about 20 to 30% of games ran on Steam Machine. which already reduced the appeal for players, and on top of that came complicated setup, raw drivers, and not the smallest price. Plus a pretty weird gamepad with touchpads instead of sticks. By the way, it'll play an important role in the future, but at that moment it didn't save the Steam machine, and with it, Steam OS. But that didn't stop Valve. They learned from that failure. And by the Steam Deck launch, they made a technology called Proton for running Windows applications on Linux, not to get too nerdy. Yeah, they didn't make Proton from scratch, but based on Wine. But who cares if it actually worked, and now most games from Steam could be launched on Steam Deck. The first test units they sent to bloggers worked with most new games without much hassle. Of course, there were games that refused to launch like that, but Valve promised to quickly deal with all of it and even introduced game sorting, from fully compatible to not working or questionable. That's exactly why this rating system appeared. But you might ask, why would Valve, a company that already got burned with Linux on one device, return to it again on another? And it's simple: optimization. Valve perfectly tuned SteamOS so that it doesn't load anything in the background like Windows does, eating up part of the performance or battery, which is extremely important for a portable device. In general, on any handheld PC on Windows, you could achieve a playable frame rate, even on that first A in Neo where the Resident Evil 2 remake worked poorly. You just need to increase CPU consumption, but in reality, behind this just hides something more important. Because when you increase the consumption of a stationary device, it takes electricity from the network, from the outlet, and there's plenty of it there. But when we increase consumption on a portable device, its battery starts draining faster. And this is that fine line that's very hard to find. So the device is powerful enough to run modern games and not too power hungry, so the battery lasts at least a couple hours, because what's the point of a portable device if it works for half an hour at most? And achieving that result on Windows is much harder than on Linux. Microsoft fans can argue, of course. But it's enough to look at the Legion Go S, which comes in two versions on Steam OS and Windows with identical hardware, and the Steam OS version works noticeably better. Checkmate. Plus, recently Microsoft themselves rolled out a lightweight version of Windows 11 with Xbox Interface Core on the ROG Xbox Ally, basically agreeing that base Windows isn't suitable for portables. And what pushed them to do this was exactly Valve's success, when Steam OS just started eating away a chunk of the significant operating systems market. And this is one of those factors that already changed the industry, forcing even a corporation like Microsoft to move. But Valve didn't just shake up PC gaming, they also took a shot at revenge against consoles. The company didn't lock the device behind digital locks, didn't force subscriptions, didn't limit users in what's allowed and what's not. On the contrary, they opened everything up while still keeping the charm and convenience of consoles. You can reinstall the system, install Windows if that's more familiar to you, install emulators, other stores, launchers, mods. You can even pirate and nobody will say anything to you. You can even replace the storage inside the handheld and you won't lose your warranty. This is just fantastic. While on the Switch too, even by copying your licensed cartridge through MigSwitch, you get banned. Yeah, there are nuances. Since the deck is essentially a handheld PC, sometimes you need to play with CPU consumption, adjust in-game settings, enable FSR, but even with this, Valve helps, constantly releasing updates, and in-game settings have even appeared on consoles, and plus, all this is in a console shell. Visually, there's no overloaded interface with tons of icons. Here's your store, here are your installed games, here are convenient pop-up menus with settings. That's more than enough by default. But if that's not enough for you, nothing stops you from switching to desktop mode, opening the console, and installing whatever you want. In short, Valve managed to combine the simplicity and comfort of regular consoles for those who only played on consoles before, together with the complete freedom of a regular PC for those who need that too. And this is also kind of revolutionary because Valve proved that open philosophy doesn't hurt business. On the contrary, it creates loyalty and trust, which you can't buy with any advertising campaigns I personally judge by myself, because pirating on the Steam Deck, even though you can do it, I just don't want to at all. Better to wait a bit and buy the desired game on sale, but to each their own, of course. When Steam Deck came out, many thought it was just an experiment. Well, Valve came up with something again. They'll try it and forget about it, like with the Steam machine, but this time, everything turned out differently. The deck didn't just catch on, it created a new market. Literally a year after the Steam Deck's release, a chain reaction started in the industry companies that never even thought about handhelds suddenly realized, people are buying this, and pretty actively. And by the rules of any forming market, You need to grab your piece of the pie at the start. So soon appeared Asus ROG Ally, Lenovo Legion Go, MSI Claw, and other handhelds from well-known companies. For some reason, only Alienware, who once were ahead of the entire market with their concept, never released anything. And the important thing here isn't even that everyone suddenly started releasing their handhelds, but what followed. If at the very beginning, as I mentioned, producing handheld PCs was expensive because they made them almost piece by piece, then the more companies came to the market, the cheaper hardware production became, because all these companies went, surprisingly, to AMD. And AMD, seeing the growing demand for mobile chips, started mass producing them, and component prices started dropping sharply. What used to cost thousands of dollars could now be bought for half the price. And because of this, even Chinese handhelds now cost the same as the Steam Deck that's $400 to $500, which is, by the way, the price of regular consoles. Well, around that. And considering what freedom the deck gives you with discounts and modding, you have to think, what's more important to you? Better graphics like on consoles, or the capabilities of a handheld with its freedom? Now, this isn't a premium toy for geeks, but just another niche in the gaming industry with competitive pricing compared to other options. And, of course, speaking about how the deck changed the gaming industry, we can't not mention comfort. I already partially touched on this in the operating system design, like regular consoles without all the unnecessary stuff. But here, we're talking about ergonomics, because making a handheld PC isn't that complicated. The first handhelds looked like regular laptops, just shrunk down with a keyboard, opening screen, sticks positioned who knows how. You could still play on them, but they clearly didn't think much about comfort. Different story with Valve, who before releasing the device made dozens of mock-ups to literally feel out the most comfortable ergonomics, during which they even added those same trackpads from the failed Steam controller, which on the Steam Deck are simply unbeatable. Not only can you control the mouse with them in games where sticks aren't supported, type text conveniently, though there's also a touchscreen, and just split these panels into sections and use them for quick menu selection or scrolling. So they're not mandatory, which is why other manufacturers either didn't add them at all or limited themselves to a tiny window, but nevertheless, trackpads turned out to be very convenient, as are symmetrical sticks. About the overall ergonomics, when you have rear grips for holding or adequate weight, I won't go into detail here. I think it's already clear, but what I absolutely can't understand is why all manufacturers unanimously decided that the right stick below the left one should be comfortable. Yeah, it works on a gamepad, but on a gamepad, the grip is different. It's a completely different device, and I'm already starting to develop some conspiracy theory in my head, like since Windows and Xbox belong to Microsoft, then the stick layout on devices with their operating system should be like on an Xbox gamepad. I understand this is purely a crazy theory, but I simply can't find another logical explanation. Different manufacturers, without conspiring, start stamping out the same layout: ROG Ally, Legion, MSI Claw, even though many complain it's uncomfortable. If you know why, write your opinion in the comments. I think they just didn't even test this. They took the generally accepted gamepad standards and tried to stretch them onto handheld realities. Different story with Valve, where they clearly tested everything and made the stick symmetrical, moreover, adding a gyroscope to them. So the Steam Deck, though technically objectively outdated, remains the ergonomic standard of modern portables. And in general, in just a couple years, handheld PCs transform from a niche hobby into a full-fledged industry direction. Companies now compete not only for the most powerful console, but also for the most convenient way to play anywhere. And the main trigger that started all this was Valve. It's like Apple with the iPhone. Apple themselves didn't invent anything new. They just gathered already existing technologies together and made them convenient to use. And this was at a time when everyone was using button phones. What this led to, I think everyone already knows. Now everyone has their own touchscreen smartphone in their pocket, and some are watching this video through it right now. Who knows? Maybe soon consoles won't be needed, because a new generation of handhelds will appear that, when docked, will be graphically indistinguishable from consoles, but which, if desired, you can take with you anywhere. Essentially, right now, this is the only thing stationary consoles win over handheld PCs at, but it's only a matter of time. Steam Deck didn't just change the market. It reminded us that games aren't about graphics, not FPS, but the ability to play where and when you want. And maybe that's where the real future of gaming is, not in endlessly improving graphics, grind, or world scale. And that's it. If you liked the video, don't forget to support it with a like, recommend it to friends. It helps YouTube promote it further, and if you're here for the first time, then of course subscribe. We have fun and interesting stuff here. And as always, thanks for your attention, and see you soon in the next videos.